Thanatechnology, the root still being which is death, and then technology being the tech side of it. So Thanatology being the broader study of death and dying, and then Thanatechnology is a subfield of Thanatology where there's different angles people are looking at Thanatechnology. Some people are looking at alternative burial methods. Some people are looking at products to help you write your wills. Some people are looking at building applications in the death tech space. So it really is a diverse, really small field in and of itself. But the basis of it is still in thanatology, and then you're adding on that secondary layer of the innovation that's happening within the funeral industry and the burial industry and the death industry and the end of life care industry, which I think most people have, I would say, a misinformed impression that it's an antiquated field, and from my experience, it's actually an extremely innovative, exciting field to be in, and every day people are coming up with new ways to kind of push the rituals and traditions that we know to make them more tech advanced, which is exciting, and it's always going to be shifting the landscape of thanatechnology.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. And I'm super excited to welcome my guest, Symon. Symon, you and I met on LinkedIn. Again, one of those death tech space that thanatologist. And once we connected, we realized we've got a lot in common. And so what got you here? And what is it about death tech that you feel that you really want to inspire?
Sure. I'll kind of take you back, a long time ago to the very beginning of my journey. I started hospice volunteering when I was in middle school, and I had always been drawn to end of life care. So I knew this was the space I was going to work in, and I just wasn't really sure how. I felt like there were so many different things that interested me, and end of life care, even though it's niche, is actually a really broad field where you can come at it from a bunch of different angles. And so I started first with the hospice volunteering, then I moved into conducting studies. I lived on the Navajo Nation and gathered a bunch of information about the difference of end of life care practices on the Navajo Nation versus what I had seen in my life at the hospice center in which I worked at. And then from there, studied thanatology in undergrad, which is the study of death and dying. And I had always known that there would be classes available, but didn't know how many subjects actually covered death and dying. And so while I was pulling together this thanatology major, I was really pleasantly surprised by how many people were actually talking about death. It was just like one course in the business school, one course in the English program, and there were a lot of people discussing it from different angles, which was really cool. There was like a thanatology major they could take. There was a gerontology school, so people were taking classes within gerontology, but none of them were really focused on the end of life. They were focused on prolonging life toward the end, and so it was just a different lens, to look at death through. And from there, I went on into a master's in documentary filmmaking, and since then have worked on YouTube channels on end of life care. I run a startup that's a death tech startup. We call it AI Death Doula. I've worked as a death doula myself, and I have really just kind of gone across the board in end of life care to try to find my niche, and I think I've finally found it in Thanatechnology. And really what I'm pushing for is home-based care in end of life care through technology, and how does technology give more autonomy to end of life care choices. So that's my whole story, and where I am now, and I think it's ever evolving, but I don't think I'll ever know everything about end of life care, which is what's so exciting about it
Well,
to
that's
me.
what makes you an innovator. And to go the full spectrum, right, from Navajo Nation, right, so very low tech, if any, to now developing an app called the AI Death Doula, which we could talk more about. But I just want to take a step back and Thanatech, right? So you use that
Yeah,
terminology. For some of our listeners, they might not be familiar with it. So how would you define
sure.
it?
So Thanatechnology, the root still being which is death, and then technology being the tech side of it. So Thanatology being the broader study of death and dying, and then Thanatechnology is a subfield of Thanatology where there's different angles people are looking at Thanatechnology. Some people are looking at alternative burial methods. Some people are looking at products to help you write your wills. Some people are looking at building applications in the death tech space. So it really is a diverse, really small field in and of itself. But the basis of it is still in thanatology, and then you're adding on that secondary layer of the innovation that's happening within the funeral industry and the burial industry and the death industry and the end of life care industry, which I think most people have, I would say, a misinformed impression that it's an antiquated field, and from my experience, it's actually an extremely innovative, exciting field to be in, and every day people are coming up with new ways to kind of push the rituals and traditions that we know to make them more tech advanced, which is exciting, and it's always going to be shifting the landscape of thanatechnology.
And when I think of Thanatechnology, I'm thinking same coin, two different sides. One is the very physical, humanistic aspect, and then the other side is that digital data piece. And I am fascinated, right? Because we can talk about how technology, yes, what are we going to do with our remains? There's new technology coming out, and new ways of creating our final disposition and choices too, as well as I know a lot of funeral directors now that they're using AI assistants when they're meeting with the families to capture note taking. I'm involved with a project that is an AI voice activated assistance when you call the funeral home, just gathering that data. So that's on the one side of the coin. But then the question is from memorializing ourselves. This is where we go down the black black mirror hole. It's not to go too deep too quickly, but what happens to our data? And how is artificial intelligence going to impact the way we died in the past with just a box of photos to how we're dying today, which is like, okay, I've got all of my social media accounts, to what is it going to look like tomorrow when AGI, right? Right, artificial general intelligence comes into play, and how are we gonna be able to memorialize ourselves that way?
Yeah, but I think memorialization of ourselves through our data is a really complex topic. I think most people don't even think about their data after they die. It's only really recently that people are even, you had us set up legacy contacts the other day, or Facebook now you can kind of switch your settings, or people are putting out videos of themselves post-mortem being like, "Hi, I've died." And that's all new, relatively new, and I think people have more data than they know. That has been my experience is like, wait, I have so many passwords and so many accounts. And I know there are some companies that will help after someone has died. They'll be like, here are the main accounts people typically have, and we'll help you close all of those out. There are some that kind of keep all your passwords in one place, and they'll say, here's access to everything for a specific designated person to ease the burden of all of our accounts, all of our data online, and yet, I think most people don't think about the fact that that data is still owned by these companies. That data can be used post-mortem in ways that you might not have access to accepting because you're now dead. And it's just a bit trickier because we have so much out there that we didn't before. And I think that people are very trusting of companies, online applications, and willing to put in very personal, specific information without ever thinking that they're going to lose access to that account or thinking about what happens when they die. And so I don't have an answer about what the future looks like in this. It's just I do think it's important that we talk about it, and I do think it's important that when you are setting up all of these accounts, bank accounts, whatever it might be, that you do take the time to designate the people who will get access to all of that after you die, because anyone can die at any point in time, and that's the reality of our life, and a lot of people are just avoidant of thinking it could happen to them.
Now, you created the AI Death Doula. What inspired you based on everything you just shared? What was the precedence? What was the catalyst for you to create this app?
So I had worked as a tech consultant for a bit in the private equity world. And what I was doing was helping companies identify pain points and use cases to solve those pain points using AI applications in some way. Um, and while I was doing that, I was thinking about my own work and I was like, okay, well, in end of life care, my biggest pain point as a practitioner was that there's not a resource hub for us at all. We can search on the internet, we can try to find the right piece of legislation that lets us know if you can bury someone in your backyard in a specific county, but I can't be like a one-stop shop for everything, and there's nowhere for me to turn other than like the vast Google. And so, my idea started off as just a resource center, and I didn't know what shape that was gonna take, but I had had hundreds of hours of content of speaking with end-of-life care professionals due to my documentaries in grad school, my YouTube channels post-grad school, and so I just started with the fact that I had a lot more information than most people had, and I figured, "Why don't I upload that to a few different language models and see what happens. Can it talk like the death doulas I know? Can it talk like the palliative care physicians I know?" And we tested it, and I luckily met the most amazing partner in this. His name's Wolfgang, and he runs the engineering school at University of Salzburg, and so he hooked me up with a bunch of his students who were willing to help build out the back end of our app. And so it kind of just all came together without like an extreme amount of effort put into trying to figure it all out. It just was all there for us, and I was like, "Let's take on this opportunity because we have the data, we have the expertise, we have the engineering capacity," and that's how it grew. But the goal now is to actually get that in the hands of users. We have a few different ideas of how we're going to actually make that happen on the marketing end, but, with more user interaction of the product, we can then continuously iterate and improve, and that's really our goal right now at this stage is to get it to people so that they can tell us, "We don't like this answer," or "We love that answer." And is it helpful? Does it allow people to ask those questions that they're not comfortable asking a human, with accurate, accessible information being handed to them in a very lovely and comforting way that a human might speak to you as well.
Anytime we're talking about AI, one of the features that we want to make sure of is the word empathetic, right? I mean, empathy is really what makes humans who we are. And even knowing AI will never because they're not sentient, right? They don't have that capacity, but certainly in their
Yeah.
delivery, the words they choose, the tone, the cadence. I know when I'm working with my Gen AI, it's just, I'm blown away by, uh, right now it's July of 2025, but when I, started the voice activation probably like 4 or 5 months ago, and where it is today is mind blowing. So I can just imagine, having that uh, ability to talk to an artificial intelligence, especially, I mean, humans are sometimes hard to talk to,
Mm.
especially about this topic, right? Even when there's family members. As a hospice clinician, I've been in situations, I'm sure you have, where you walk into a patient's house and the patient's in the other room and the family members are immediately saying, "Don't tell mom she's on hospice." Right? But there's still so many questions that need to be answered. So is that where your app can come in and provide that additional support?
Yes, the hope is that our app would be able to answer the questions that people may not know who to ask them of, or they are uncomfortable asking. And we're talking about family members wanting to kind of keep secrets about another loved one's illness or if they're on hospice, and I find that so interesting because typically if your body is dying. It's not a shock to the person who is dying no matter what information is withheld from them. And so for them to be able to make the right decisions for themselves, I think having access to information about what's happening to your body, what can you do with your body after, what are some grief groups, or what are some other hospices in our area that might offer different facilities than the one that I am in right now. Those are all really helpful questions that you might not know who to ask. Your hospital might not know that. Your funeral home might not have the same burial practices as one in another county. And so it's just important to know you can access that information. But the question we're tackling now is, do people know what questions to
I think
ask? Like,
that
do they
actually,
have, yeah, the
that's
death
the
literacy aspect of our app is what I am currently hoping to test is, okay, we have a bunch of answers, but if people don't know how to ask the questions, can they get those answers? And I think in my world, I always then thinking everyone knows the right terminology to put in because the people in my sphere do, and that is just not the case across the board. People don't know the word terramation, or they don't know the difference between aquamation and cremation, and there's all of these different terms that our app has backlogged, and it knows the proper information, but if people don't know how to ask it, it's not functioning in the way that a user needs it to function. And so the next round of testing is, I'm hoping to use that empathy piece to see, does it feel right when it asks or answers your question, but also, do you know what to ask it so it can give you that proper empathetic answer? And so I think the ethics of this are what's important, because we don't want to give people inaccurate information, but we also don't want to give them answers that are inaccessible to them. So it's been a tricky balance, and I think death literacy and death education are really at the base of our struggles here, is that we need to become a more death literate society, and I think we do that through conversations like this, through access to apps that might teach us something we didn't know before, through death education programs.
it's fascinating that in school, right? The death, finance, and sex, like the most humanistic, lifelong skill sets that we need and to understand the concepts. I mean, how many college students come out with a 4-year degree, but they don't know how to do personal finance, right? Or they
Absolutely.
really don't have a strong understanding of their body and their sexuality. And
Yeah,
and death to me is, like I said, those three topics. And yet, as humanistic as those three topics are, they are the most taboo topics.
absolutely. Yeah, my grad school research actually w was about the similarities between sex and death. That's what I was interested in. That's I only thing I wanted to study
You
was
tell.
why people talk about the 2. So,
Spill
I
the
was really
tea.
fascinated with the fact that every person is born and well, for the most part, you are born because 2 people had sex, and you're most likely going to have sex, and you're definitely
Instinctively.
going
I
to
mean,
die.
it is like it's just an
Yes, it's part
instinctive
of how humans
are wired.
continue on, exactly, and then, on the other side of that, you're definitely going to die. And yet, the 2 things that no one ever wants to talk about is sex and death. And so I was interested in exploring with both death and sex experts, like, why might that be the case? And what I found was that it's not the case everywhere. It's a very Western view that we can't talk about death and sex. It also isn't that true that people aren't talking about it. They are, just not in open spaces. It's something that you kind of do behind closed doors and that you're supposed to feel uncomfortable about for whatever plethora of reasons. And so, what I kind of came out of this thinking was the best way to bridge the 2 would to be just have, like, a life education class in, like, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, that it's not like a sex ed class and it's not a death ed class. It's just like you're a person and all animals go through these 2 processes and this is what it is. And it doesn't have to be taboo or it doesn't have to be hypersexualized or it doesn't have to be extremely morbid. It's just like the facts. Um, so that I was really fascinated with the connection between
Fascinating.
both. And I still am because it's strange that we don't just talk about sex and death like it's normal, because
So,
it is normal.
look, it's not just I mean, it is the most humanistic thing that we
Absolutely.
I mean, those are the from an experiential standpoint, right? Artificial intelligence will never, ever, ever be able to have that experience in a way that human does. I mean, that's what makes us human. I mean, I'm just having a very profound thought here, and I don't. It's so deep, I don't even know how to pronounce it. But yeah, I mean, if I put the side to side, right, artificial intelligence and sex and death, right? This is
Yeah, human.
the two. The two shall never meet.
Agreed. I was thinking, you and I had a call yesterday with a group of amazing people, and I was thinking afterward, even if AGI is, like, more amazing than we have imagined, and it can take on these human thoughts and feelings and generate its own, there still always is human intervention because someone is building that product, someone is putting the data in to make that happen, and so, I was trying to think, like, is there a time where this can happen on its own? And I went back to the fact that even with humans, there you need 2 people to have sex, or you need
To
egg and
procreate. Let's
sperm
call it
to breed an
procreate.
embryo. Yeah, to
To
procreate,
procreate, because now
exactly.
now I'm thinking of the old, Woody Allen movie Sleeper, right? And they had the sex shop.
Okay.
So
To procreate. True. Also antiquated term, I guess sex is a bunch of different things.
yeah,
And so there's always like human intervention when we create something new, and it's the same with AI. It's not going to generate something on its own. You need someone to input that data to then replicate what does your deceased loved one speak like, act like, feel like. So I was going back to the fact that even if AI can go off and create its own thoughts to make its own decisions. It needed someone somewhere along the line to feed it the right information to have it had that happen. And I don't have like a thought coming out of that. I just was really pondering that after our call yesterday was like, can we ever get to a state where a human's not there at all? And I don't know. I don't think we can.
I mean, just to have a crystal ball and see where we are, and I don't know. I mean, there's
I don't know
certainly been
either.
sci-fi movies. I mean, it's even if we talk, let's talk sci-fi, right? For those that
Yeah.
haven't seen the, Black Mirror episodes, I mean, here we are, 2025. I think some of those episodes might be 10 or 15 years old, and it's just amazing how they've been hitting the nail on the head. So the one episode in particular that is kind of a can of worms, but I do wanna open it up. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Um, Woman loses her husband. Someone sends her an email saying, "Hey, you should try this website." And then she opens up the website, and somehow the website, this is on Black Mirror, right? So this is fictional, but I think we're almost there where the website was able to scrape her husband's digital footprint and then create a text bot that she eventually started texting with. And then
Mhm.
after a period of time, the text bot offered her the opportunity to have a voice activation, and then somewhere the voice activation became like a humanoid, and she just right, the whole episode was about that. It doesn't feel that far off. Like,
I agree. I don't think that seems that far off, but I'm also not sure if it's as creepy as it might have felt watching Black Mirror, because I know every time I've watched it, it's, like, supposed to be eerie, and I know I mean, yesterday I wrote an article kind of trying to tackle this, is, like, is it that creepy to have your deceased loved ones part of your life? And across the world, different cultures do have deceased loved ones as part of their daily life, whether they live alongside the corpse of that person, whether they exhume bodies every year and dress them up, whether they speak to deceased loved ones as if they're in the room with them. There's a lot of people around the world who do interact with death and dead relatives or loved ones on the daily. And Western culture just isn't one of those right now. And so I'm curious if this is like a new way to embrace a new tradition, and is it creepy to talk to your deceased loved one via a computer, or is it just a new way to work through grief? Is that your new bereaved state? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of it in a different context other than, like, we're playing spooky, creepy music in the background and it's supposed to feel eerie. Maybe it's, going to help us in our processes, and we just don't know because it hasn't happened yet. And so I don't have, like, an answer of if it's good or bad or what it's gonna do to grief in general, but I do think maybe we can like, take a page out of the book from a bunch of different cultures and think about why don't we live alongside death the way a lot of people do?
so a couple thoughts there. One is, I mean, I know many people that they have voicemail from someone who passed away, and it might be years old, and they just won't delete that voicemail. I know someone who has an algorithm like one of the old tape recorder, phone messaging machines, and they have not gotten rid of it because their beloved one is the last message was on there. I mean, people from 9/11 going down to the planes, like, all of those. Okay, so there's that piece. And even I think about songs, right? There's, a couple of, like, powerful songs of people that I know they left their legacy through a song, for example, working with music therapy. The question we wanna ask is, there's that razor's edge of, if we're gonna talk grief, when does preserving the sound bites from our beloved ones, or you talked about having the corpse, next to the even the ashes, right? Either the ashes, or we talked about human composting, like, at what point is it therapeutic and allowed, because the grieving process is to feel and then release, right? So you can move on with your life. But for some people, the question is, when does it inhibit them moving on with their life? Because they have easy accessibility to their voices, and if if we created a bot, right? If if a company like Replica is able to scrape my digital footprint and create a Nikki bot that, my grandchildren can have ongoing conversations with because I've recorded all of my stories on another platform. So my question to you is, from a bioethics standpoint, it really is, that really
Yeah. I
conversation.
think I mean, I am in no way a grief expert, and so I genuinely don't know when it becomes kind of overwhelming for someone to have that presence in their life all the time. I think I mean, none of this is really technology, but it makes me think of how there have been a bunch of different practices over hundreds of years of people, like, keeping someone's hair in a locket, or it was very common practice to, after someone died, that was the only photo you would take of them, and so a lot of photos in your home were of deceased relatives, and things like that seem creepy today because it's not the practice that we have, but is it really that creepy? Or is it just the way in which people were memorializing their loved ones at that time, and so I'm curious if this is going to be a conversation like that, or if it is going to be something that shapes grief in a way we haven't seen before, and I just don't think we're going to know until we have some distance from these practices, because to some people, it is weird to wear a locket of hair around your neck, or to turn someone's ashes into a diamond necklace, or to keep ashes in your home rather than bury them, or to care for a body yourself and touch that body and wash that body and then bury that body on your own. And yet those are practices that have gone on throughout the course of human history. And it's really recently that those things creep us out and we want distance from it. And so I just wonder if this is a new way that we're trying to interact with death that we haven't seen before because we haven't had access to that technology. And is it just like an evolving form of what we've done previously? Or the other side of that, is it really going to hinder people's process of moving on? And is it even right to move on? Are we supposed to move on? Or if you love someone forever, do you grieve someone forever? Which is kind of the camp I'm in. And so I don't know if you should ever move on from grieving someone, but I do think you move on from mourning someone or being in the state of bereavement, where it's like a all-encompassing, overpowering feeling that makes you unable to do other things rather than to me, grief can be remembering someone, and I know that's, like, nuanced in the fact that there's 3 terms that are kind of used interchangeably, but from my understanding, those 3 do take on different forms within yourself, and so I wonder if grief should last forever if you love someone forever, and so is it maybe a good thing to have their voice that you can go back and listen to whenever you want? I just I'm not sure.
Jury is out. As end of life death doulas, the purpose and the service that we provide is to lessen the grieving process, or as someone's going through the grieving process, that they understand because their head might not be clear, or they might not know their choices. So the AI death doula, right? The purpose there is to let people know that to support them as they're going through this inevitable journey, but letting them know they're being supported. Maura, is that the name of your AI agent?
Yeah.
So talk a
Yes.
little bit about Maura and how she's gonna be able to guide people, into making those, end of life decisions.
Sure, so the overall platform is called AI Death Doula, and within that, we developed an agent named Maura, which means death, the name Maura, and so that's kind of why we went with that name, and she is modeled after everyone I know in this space, because she was quite literally fed transcripts from everyone I know in this space. The goal is that she is there to be a non-bias, non-judgmental, which I know is hard because the AI is inherently biased. It's fed our own data, which is biased, but she's meant to let you know that what you want is okay, and it's okay to have a party where you're taking tequila shots rather than a funeral where everyone's wearing black, and it's okay if you wanna be buried even though the rest of your family is cremated, and it's okay if you want an at-home funeral or a living funeral, and just here's how you do it. And so the support goes beyond just someone to talk to or something to talk to. It's letting you know that there are a bunch of ways to die and a bunch of ways to have a burial, to have a funeral, to deal with grief. And I often, like, shudder when people talk about, like, a good death or something because 'cause I'm like, "There's no one way to die," and that's so individual of what a good death could mean to you, and so I see my role as a death doula and coordinator and Mara's role as a death doula app to just be able to give people accurate accessible information, and the support really being to know that it's normal, whatever you want, as long as it's not harming someone else is really what is supposed to happen at the end of life, and you should die the way you want to, and often people say, like, "You die the way you live," and I really believe that, like, if you want some really fun funeral, let's do it. If you want a funeral that is a little more, on the somber side, let's do it. I feel like I am, like, a alternative burial advocate, and yet, if someone does wanna be buried in a very expensive casket in a vault in the ground, like, let's do it. It's really supposed to be there to support you in whatever you feel is most yourself. So that's the goal, and I really hope through the trials and the testing that people feel that and that they're able to respond back when it doesn't give them that much support, so we know how to evolve the answers to make it feel as supportive as possible.
And I know that in the My Final Playbook, which is part of what Endeavo does, is all those thoughts, feelings, you better write it down, right? You better have that plan. Let's talk about your legal,
And
financial,
it's okay
personal
if
debt.
it changes.
And it's going to be
Yeah,
iterative, right? It's not what you decide to do today, who you decide, who your people are. It's going to constantly change. So you need to be constantly updating. But you and I are saying the same thing. You have to start somewhere. And the somewhere is let's just open this conversation. Get
yeah,
comfortable with talking about death, options,
yep,
choices. This was awesome.
and I think
Yeah.
it's a more fun process than people give it credit
For
for
you and I,
because
like,
but I
maybe
mean it, like,
not everybody. But that's our
it's
mission, right? Our mission really is
it's our
to
mission, and it can be something where you're talking about memories, you're talking about your most important people in your life, your favorite songs, your favorite food, your favorite locations,
right.
and that is exciting to be like, "Hey, I can bring all my people together, and we can do something that really represents me and our relationship to one another," and I think if we have a switch in mindset about what it means to plan, advanced care planning, it can be an activity that you can do casually. It doesn't have to be sitting down like with a lawyer being like, let's go get this notarized. It
Right.
can be over dinner, just discussing like, hey guys, I want you all to know that this is what I've been thinking. And I like those conversations. And so I'm always trying to inspire other people to have those same conversations.
Well, this was an awesome conversation. So thank you for taking the time to share with us. Now, where can people find you and your app?
Sure. So, to find the app, it's aideathdoula.com. And just find me. My name's Symon Braun Freck. You can find me at simonbraunfreck.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and so it's SYMONBRAUNFRECK.com or aideathdoula.com.
And with that, thank you so much for joining, and we'll end here. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.